Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this night-ending bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to this night-ending bonus upload, shall we? I had talked to a retired Air Force intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance agent. He worked for the Air Force till 2013 when he retired, 1 year before the closing of that division. And I spoke with him last night for a little while, had a great conversation, and he shed some more light on some things that he was kind of vague on last conversation we had. So I asked what I could share. He said, share what you want, just like last time, just not my name, not my email, and not my phone number. I said, absolutely. I said, I do appreciate what you're sharing with us. And so let's get into what he shared with us, or with me. Now I'm sharing it with you. So during his years of work with the ISR, or Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance, for the Air Force, he told me a lot about what they were responsible for doing. A lot of that was surveillance in other countries. What he shared with me the other day was, not only are we using or have the capability of using these creatures, manipulating genetics and stuff like that, that China is as well. He believes that a few other countries are in the process of doing it. If China is, chances are the majority of communist countries are as well. It's a tool. These creatures are a tool. I talked a little bit a while ago on my own information that I learned about a scientist from Russia who was forced to share her work with the Russian or Soviet government. I guess it would have been the Soviet Union at that point, where she was studying the cloaking abilities of these creatures. What he said, they used to watch certain locations. America, we have DUMBs. Well, over there, they really don't need to hide anything from their citizens because they really don't have citizens. If you're not pro your country or pro your leader, then you're disposable. A lot of these things were above ground. Now, that I found completely interesting because I always kind of had I always figured that we weren't, if we had that capability, why were we the only country that was capable or able to use these creatures. Yes, we are a great country, and yes, I love America, but there are other countries that have the same amount of capabilities we have, like it or not, unfortunately. Then we started to talk a little bit about Lake Mead and some bodies that were found. And tonight, or last night, excuse me, he shared with me a little more on that and a little bit more on some national parks, which I was kind of floored. He pretty much will start with the national parks quickly. Any kind of base, militarized base, is closely located to a national park. They may not be right bordering or butting up against them, but there is a close proximity. Okay. And with these national parks, they're dense forests. And a lot of times they are using or experimenting with certain programs, certain projects. Let's say they are harnessing Dogman or something else, some other genetic mutation that they've created, and some hikers stumble across them. What do you think is going to happen to those hikers? Do you think our government is just going to allow them to walk away? No. He also said that they are creating very strange creatures, ones that we would not even imagine capable of existing in today's world. I mentioned to him, I said, well, how familiar are you with my channel? How familiar are you with cryptozoology? The crawlers, this and that. And I flat out asked him, I said, I truly believe that these creatures were created in Dolce, New Mexico. And he said that they were created after. What he knows is that, yes, it is an alien hybrid. More or less, the aliens or extraterrestrial, however you want to call it, and wherever they came from. He actually said the majority of the creatures that our government, or extraterrestrials that our government worked with during the 50s, 60s, and early 70s weren't even from outer space. They had harnessed they'd harnessed a way of crossing space through portals on our land. So I said, well, is that dimensional? And he said, interstellar. So they're crossing, almost like a wormhole right on Earth. I'm sitting there while he's talking to me and telling me this, like, my brain is spinning. It's going 1,000 miles an hour. So he pretty much stated to me when I said the crawlers, I mentioned the crawlers, and I have this written down. I wrote this all down as we were talking. So I filled up probably 15 pages of a yellow notebook. He said what these crawlers were almost like a security force for extraterrestrial. They resembled the extraterrestrial that were working with our government and sharing secrets for our secrets, which would be human being, human test trials and stuff like that. He said that these creatures were like hunters. They would go and hunt these people that were going to be test trials for these extraterrestrials. They were the ones, the hunter-gatherers, kind of. They didn't kill the people. They grabbed them and brought them back to whatever kind of military installation was used. And then our government saw the capabilities of these things. They were silent. They were very quick, agile. They could fit in spaces most humanoid-like creatures couldn't, like a Dogman, a human, a Sasquatch. They were smaller, but just as strong. They were the ones that were finding the human test subjects. And our government decided sometime along the lines to harness the capabilities of these creatures and kind of make our own with the help of the extraterrestrial. There were a lot of he said there was a lot of experimentation going on after Dolce. He said that he is aware of underground bases being active through the 90s. It was really hush-hush after a certain period of time, but through the 90s there were experimentations going on. Which just, I mean, you have no idea what what hearing this information was like. It was just absolutely mind-blowing. He said that when there would be these test runs of Dogman or any other kind of creatures used to hunt, or, if they were a test run in national parks, that a set of hikers would come across them, they're gone. They would be hunted down. Some are never heard from. Some are quickly brought into an experimental zone. He did say there are multiple portals throughout the national forests, and for a specific reason of, these are dense, deep forests. And like I just said, their military installations are, not all of them are located near these national forests, but a lot of them are. They're not butt up right against them, but how many times have we heard the military going into a national forest? Well, he said the reason for that is when these portals open and these extraterrestrial travelers come over, that they need a way to get to these bases, these underground bases that are below our military installations, to experiment on humans and trade secrets with our government. So I can't even, part of me here, to be honest with you guys, part of me was like looking at the Dolce files all over again. When you first start to read about Dolce and what our government did with extraterrestrials, you're almost like, no, this couldn't have happened. This is a work of science fiction. Part of me was shocked like that while I was talking to this guy. he had mentioned Lake Mead last time. I said, so what's the deal with Lake Mead? He had said, why do you think there are so many bodies tossed in that lake? There's a installation right around that area. Some are discarded after they are used for experimentation. He gave me a perfect example and said that there was a guy named Tom Earned, and his family was on a boat one evening. There's no sign of him after the boating trip. He didn't fall over. The boat didn't capsize. Just recently, they found his body. How do you find a body that disappeared 21 years ago? That, I mean, if you think about it, it would be melted, you know? Just bear with me, you know? He said this. He said that body would be like stew, you know, fish, varmint, getting to it, this and that. But they were able to identify his remains because they weren't that bad. They weren't like 21 years of rotting in a lake that's responsible for drinking water at that. It was almost as if when the bodies were found just recently, that his body was tossed in there within the last 6 months. This is all information that he was sharing with me, and I went back and looked into that guy, and he was last seen on a family trip in 2002. Yet just recently you find his body and are able to identify him. It was shocking, truly shocking. He said that he knows for a fact that during the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s that the government, had gotten intelligence from these extraterrestrials to harness the creatures that were already on planet Earth, like Dogman, Bigfoot. They were capable, after they got this technology, they were capable of controlling them. You know, we're talking about the 50s and 60s. You know, we were still so far unadvanced at that time. You know, modern day humanity, like the smartphone is only, 10 years old, 12 years old, 15 years old, not long. So, you know, we think of these experimentations going on back then with the capabilities that we have now. Something's responsible for that. Not humankind, that's for gosh darn sure. He truly believes, without a shadow of a doubt, that the government are still, you know, he reached out to me after he had heard about the Border Patrol thing. Because for him, he said that really made it real that they were still doing what they were doing. They had pretty much harnessed these creatures in case anything went down and they needed to be used. Now, I saw, and I brought this up to him because in the comment section, there was a comment that said, how would they hide this from humanity? And he said, very easy. They're doing it every day. Attacks that are blamed on regular animals. You know, it fits the case, you know, like Tony Aarons, Amber Miller. They weren't regular animals, but yet this case that just recently happened to an old guy in Alabama that was torn apart by dogs, that was really torn apart by dogs. You can almost use that as a comparison. Oh, well, this guy was torn apart in broad daylight in front of people by dogs. So why wasn't these people? And anyone who sees these creatures at use are automatically taken out. And if they aren't, they are labeled as insane, and then they're taken out. You know, once a whistleblower comes to the light, they are easily taken care of. I myself and other people who are doing what I do are not whistleblowers. We're just sharing information that we gather that can be written off, you know, as active imaginations, right? So these creatures are definitely being used by our government. Other governments have the capability of using them against their own people. And we have created monsters. Our government is constantly creating monsters. People claim to see military vehicles going in and out of national parks. Like he said, why do you think that happens? Because there are portals that these interdimensional travelers, these extraterrestrials, cross over, and they cannot be seen. So what happens? The government sends the military in to transport these extraterrestrials to where they need to go. Military bases with underground military bases below them. Once again, while he was sharing this information with me, my brain was, I don't know how many people have read all of the information about Dolce. There's a lot of it. But when you do, and when you first start to read about it, you truly are like, this can't be real. Yet it is. It's truly mind-blowing. And I don't know what else to say, but that was the end of our conversation. And, you know, he super nice guy, retired in 2013. You know, he's been sitting on this information for 10 years. But when he heard about the Border Patrol agents, seeing a Dogman hunt down migrant people, it automatically reminded him of military and government projects in case, you know, he had said, like, when during the riots that happened in Chicago and California and stuff in the 60s and 70s, there was actually talk of sending dogmen and these type of creatures in to stop it from happening. Thank God they didn't. But imagine if they did. So, I don't know. I asked the guy if he would, you know, stay in contact with me. And, you know, he just said, I pretty much just shared everything I know with you. Do with it what you want. He was adamant about not recording him. You know, he really was. He asked me about 1,000 times if I had gotten rid of his email address, which he used a Proton one, whatever they are, Proton, and a phone number that was a burner phone. So he asked me to get rid of both of those, even though he is pretty sure they can't be traced. But, you know, don't save them on your phone. Don't write them down. Don't do this. I said, well, I did write your phone number down. I apologize. He said, get rid of it. If I want to contact you, I will. So that's the latest from the retired Air Force intelligence officer. And like I said, our government is up to no good, and they are hiding secrets from us that are no good. How do we trust? How are we supposed to trust something? Trust when they have no care for us, you know? It's scary. It's very scary. All right, guys. So I'm just going to share with you guys some encounters because to me, this doesn't feel like a full upload. So let's jump into some encounters. Today's first encounter is a Sasquatch encounter. Tyler County, Texas. I was headed home to Port Arthur from Oklahoma at around 7 p.m. I was on Highway 287 between Chester and Woodville, about 5 minutes from Woodville, when I saw this big, dark thing running down the side of a hill towards the highway. I had my brights on, and it stopped in the middle of the highway. I slammed on my brakes, and I slid sideways, and it looked at me with red eyes. The thing was dark brown and hairy, about 8 feet tall, with a chest about 3 feet wide. My passenger window was down, and it growled at me. Then it took about 5 strides off the highway and up the hill on the north side of the highway. I stopped at a grocery store when I got to Woodville and told the cashier on duty what I saw. She said they get reports of this all the time in the big thicket. Today's second encounter. Hughes County, Oklahoma. We were walking down the road enjoying our summer vacation when one of us noticed that there was something walking in the pasture north of where we were standing. It was close to 7 feet tall, had long white hair, at least a foot, was walking on 2 legs. It stopped when it noticed us standing there watching it. Actually, we were almost too scared to run. Anyway, it acted like it was going to come our way, so we took off for a little ways, then stopped and looked again. Everyone knows that a fence with 6 strands of barbed wire is at least 5 feet. Well, it stepped over that like it was not even there, and kept going to the east, taking long strides and swinging its arms back and forth while it walked. A few days later, we were in the same general area and noticed some long white hair hooked on the top of a fence. We took it home to prove our story. We had told everybody the day before. We called it a honka. Have to say that we were more careful about how late we stayed out from that day forth. Always made sure we were home well before dark. Until that moment we saw it, we had heard lots of stories, but never believed them. Seeing is definitely believing. If you talk to anybody in the Dustin area, you will be told of several sightings of this nature, and also will be told about what everyone called the light. We found a long white hair on the top of a fence that crossed its property. Today's third encounter, Marion County, Texas. At the time I was a teenage girl, my parents and sisters and I were staying at a small weekend cabin located at the end of a dead-end road that was near Black Cypress Creek. I'd enjoyed hiking and riding my horse on the thousands of acres of pasture, wood, and creek since I was small. There had never been anything that scared me or caused me to be frightened in this lovely countryside. This ended for me after what I had witnessed. We had heard some strange screams and howls coming from the woods every night for several nights running. My mother described the sound as an old-fashioned horn that might be on an old car. But I knew it wasn't a horn. It was some sort of animal that we had not heard in the woods. One night, as one of my sisters was standing by the kitchen sink, she smelled a horrible smell, and she called me and our mother to the window. We were all three overcome by a strong stench coming from the darkness outside. We finally agreed that whatever had been making the screams in the woods was probably outside of the window, but no one volunteered to go out and see what it was. Later, after my mother went to bed, we were startled as someone or something pounded on the kitchen wall near the window. We ran to our mother, who was sleeping in her bedroom, but she refused to investigate, thinking us girls were simply trying to frighten her. Not long after, one night I returned home late from the neighbor's house. It was very dark, and the family had forgotten to leave the porch light on for me. I had to park the car approximately 30 to 50 yards from the house, because the gate was locked. I sat in the car for approximately 15 minutes to adjust my eyes to the dark, because I knew I had a long walk in the darkness to reach the front steps. I got out of the car and approached the gate. I found that my family had also forgotten to leave the gate unlocked. Rather than fumble with the lock, I decided to simply crawl through the barbed wire fence. About the time I got one leg through and was ducking down to pass through, I heard a lopping sort of sound coming towards me from down the fence line near the house. I could tell it was a large animal coming toward me, so I quickly tried to go through the fence. My first thought was that a bear was about to attack me. Suddenly, a large, dark figure loomed over me. It came to a stop about an arm's length away from me and actually bent over me as to look at me closely. I could tell that it was definitely not a bear. I actually felt the hot breath of the animal as it moved its head closer to me. I started screaming frantically. Whatever it was became alarmed at my screams and ran away. As it ran, my eyes were accustomed enough to the dark to see it run away on two legs until it was out of sight. I estimated it was very tall because it had no trouble in bending down over me to look at me. My screaming brought the family to the fence, where they helped untangle me and took me inside the house for medical attention. Today's fourth encounter, Upshur County, Texas. It was about 8 p.m. It had been an Indian summer type of day, and I had taken my horse for a long ride one Saturday afternoon. I lost track of time, and I was late getting back from my ride. This horse was a well-broke animal, and as I came down the dirt road, where there was a plank bridge, the horse started to prance, snort, and blow, and he was watching something off to my left. I have excellent night vision, and started trying to see what had spooked the horse. This horse had a long mane, and I noticed it standing part way out like it was charged by a static electricity. And the hair on my arms and back of my neck were standing up as well. There was a full moon coming up that night, and about a 10-mile-an-hour wind from the north blowing against my back. As I got over the bridge on the horse, I could see an opening in the meadow, two large creatures standing erect and side by side watching me on the horse. They appeared to be swaying back and forth, like they were trying to scent what was coming down the road. One looked to be about 7 to 8 feet tall, the other 6 to 7 feet. I started to get scared, even though they were on the other side
of the barbed wire fence, and about 35 yards from the horse and myself. I kicked the horse into a gallop and headed home, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked back over my shoulder and saw them disappear slowly, still walking erect, into the woods. Tonight's fifth encounter is a Dogman encounter. This is my very first encounter and the most frightening. It happened in the summer of 2015. My then girlfriend and I had been enjoying the summer, had a few days off from work, and on our last night of our vacation, we wanted to go and enjoy a romantic night at a location about 20 miles from our hometown. It's a pretty valley with a very clear and cold river. Various small islands are located in the stream with a bit of a brush and some small trees on them. The river is shallow enough to wade through it. It isn't well known amongst tourists, so it's great for some not safe at work activities. We love to go skinny dipping there. Well, that's what we had planned. Sadly, it went a bit different than we wanted. The first half of the night went pretty good, actually. We found a nice spot, set up a small camp, laid some blankets out, put some candles, and went skinny dipping and stuff. We got tired and decided to call it a night and wrapped ourselves up in blankets. That's when it started. All the while we were there were always some animals around, and we heard them. Deer calls, a fox, owl, just the typical noises of the night. Until they stopped. Nothing, just the murmur of the river running over the rocks. That's when we heard it for the first time. It was a howl, but no wolf. It was deep, growling, earth-shaking, and it felt like it rattled every bone in my body. It was just terrifying. My girlfriend was as shaken as I was. I've been outdoors all my childhood. I grew up in my parents' farm and in the woods around it, so I know every animal roaming around them. I know the deer calls, I know what the fox says, and I know the howl of wolves. And I know the roar of bears, but this, no, I've never heard anything like it. And I never want to hear something like it again. We suddenly decided that my bed at home is a better location to sleep than this river bed. We got up, packed our stuff, and started to head out. That's when we heard it a second time. The same howl, deep rumbling, shaking, followed by a deep growl. Whatever it was that made this noise, it was big, and we didn't want to meet. Unfortunately, it was still about 2 miles to my car. We had to cross the river 2 times to get to the river bank, where the trail through the woods to my car started. When we crossed it, we thought we saw and heard something crossing the river with us. I had a small flashlight with me, and when we arrived on the river bank, I shone it back. What we saw made our knees get weak. A huge animal was standing on the opposite riverbank. Dark fur, pointed ears, very muscular body shape, and a head almost like a German shepherd. But the most fear-inducing was its eyes, orange, yellow, glowing eyes seemingly fixed on us. We booked it. We ran all the way back to my car. We could hear it charging through the river, but it must have stopped at the bank, as we didn't hear it anymore after we entered the woods. We made it back to our car safely, and we decided never to go back there again, at least not at night. But in fact, I haven't gone there since. Today's 6th encounter is another encounter from the person who had the 5th encounter happen to them. Today I had a very creepy experience on my way to work in the morning. I normally don't believe in supernatural stuff, but I'll be damned if that was just a normal animal. On my way to work, I often use a small road through a densely wooded area. It's a pretty long and pretty straight road. I left home at around 4:30 in the morning and was driving, minding my own business, and slowly waking up completely, when I suddenly noticed what I thought was a very large, dark gray or black dog sitting next to the road. As it was still dark, I couldn't make out full detail, so I slowed down, just in case it started to run across the road. But when I got closer and the headlights captured it in full, it just stood up and calmly retreated into the bush next to the road. But as soon as it stood up, it was very clear that this was no normal dog. It was huge, bear-sized at least, or even bigger, I'd say. Shorter hind legs, very muscular front, a weirdly long snout and pointed ears, and a bushy tail. It walked almost like some kind of hyena, but always on all fours. Big predators are very rare in this area, and if there is a sighting about every 2 years or so, only some lone wolves or very, very rarely a bear wandering through. This stretch of road has always given me the creeps, but now the fear has a face. One thing I had noticed the last few days was that there were no other animals around. Normally, there were always some deer, fox, or, if I get lucky, even a badger. But this week, none, not even a bird. There had also been some reports of missing livestock in the area. 2 sheep went missing last week, and yesterday a horse was lost. It was later found brutally ripped apart and partially consumed. I don't know if the unknown canine creature is responsible for this, but I highly suspect it. Today's 7th encounter, Upshur County, Texas. It's been nearly 30 years my experience took place in the summer of 1976. Too long ago to remember the month, my husband and I were going to Lake O' the Pines for the weekend. We were meeting friends, as we often did. It was late in the afternoon, but not dark. I would say 7:30, 8 o'clock. In the summer, it didn't get dark till 9:30. On the side of the road, on the hill along the fence row, is where I saw it, maybe 10 or 15 feet away. It was squatted down, like a human would, next to the fence post. I remember how big it was. Even squatted down, it was as tall or taller than the fence post. It really shook me up. I asked my husband, "Did you see that?" We were pulling a boat, and his eyes had been on the road, so he missed it. When we got to the lake, I told everyone that I had just seen a Bigfoot. A lady friend of mine said she had seen one also in that same area while hunting. She said that she saw it through her gun scope, but was too afraid to shoot. We both wrote down what we had seen, color and all, and compared notes. Hers was just like mine. We had both seen large brownish animals, I know bears, and this was no bear. Today's 8th encounter, Cook County, Texas. I feel stupid doing this, but my teacher told us in class the other day about his Bigfoot experiences. I don't want to attempt to tell the whole story, but people should really talk to him. I respect him a lot, and he told us that he had encountered a creature at least 6 times in his life, in or near the vicinity of a bridge called the 1893 Bridge in Cook County, Texas. It's located northeast of Callisburg on Survey Road. He told us that they have seen it in the light of their headlights. He said it stood at least 8 to 9 feet tall, and that it could step over a fence line. On one occasion, he told us the creature was bouncing a limb up and down with its arms one night in the light of their headlights, and they measured the height of the limb the next day, and he said he couldn't even reach the limb. On several occasions, there was more than one person in the vehicle with him. Several times, he had people go with him during the day, looking for tracks and stuff, and he said that they found bones in the bottom of the creek where they had seen the creature during the nighttime. He claims that his buddies have taken shots at the creature, but it never had an effect. He didn't know if they had hit it. I hope this can be some use for you guys. Today's ninth encounter, Rapids Parish, Louisiana. I'm 40 years old now, and what I saw and heard was from when I was about 8 years old. My family used to go camping a lot during the summer months to various camping areas. This time we went to an area just outside of Indian Creek, known to us as Little Indian Creek. I'd been asleep when I was awakened by some sounds of raccoons in the garbage cans, as they often did. Being a kid, it was fun as well as fascinating to watch them play, so I decided to stay up and watch them. Everyone else was sleeping. I don't know how long I watched, but I noticed they kept looking toward the woods. The woods were separated from our camp by a narrow but deep stream. The embankment was about 10 feet in height at this point in the creek. All of a sudden I heard a loud splash. The sound was like waiting. It was at this point that I noticed all the raccoons were gone. I crouched down, barely looking over the window edge, so as not to let what was coming across the creek see me watching. As it rose out of the creek, it let out a very deep growl, almost roar-type sound, then made some grunting sounds as it climbed the embankment. As it did this, I heard another splash, as it sounded like another entered the water. I watched as the first silhouetted creature climbed up and out of the creek area and into sight. We kept 2 lanterns on during the night for security reasons. As I saw this creature go through our things that we were left out, I began to cry out of fear. In front of me was a creature that appeared at least 7 feet tall and very big, and appeared to be covered in hair. I watched as the second came out of the creek, making almost the same growl and grunting sounds as the first had done. I laid back down, not wanting to see them look my way and come to where I was. I lay there motionless for what seemed forever, till I heard them leave, the same way they had came. As they did, the raccoons returned shortly thereafter. The next day I found where something clawed its way up the embankment. I never told anyone what I saw that night. Today's 10th encounter, Delta County, Texas. I live in northeast Texas, close to the town of Commerce. I was witness to several incidents when I lived just outside of Commerce. At the time, I was employed for the Delta County Sheriff Department as a deputy. It was around 1990, and a friend and I were in the business of buying dairy cows and raising and reselling. My friend lived in an area close to town of Horton. The actual town is now underwater, part of Cooper Lake. This was a very remote area of dense, thick woods, running all the way to Sulphur Springs. My friend began finding his calves dead at the barn. It appeared that their necks had been broken. This all came to a head on the evening as he heard his boar hog squealing loudly from the pen. The pen was located at the edge of the woods. My friend had a very mean boar hog that weighed around 400 pounds. He called me on the phone and told me to come as fast as I could. When I arrived, he was almost in shock and told me that he went and grabbed his rifle and went to the barn. He said that he saw a very tall creature lifting his boar hog over a pallet fence. My friend fired a shot at it, and it dropped the hog and ran off. My father and I went to the pen and found a set of tracks. These resembled a very large human foot in the dirt. My father, a retired Dallas police officer, contacted friend's neighbor. The neighbor was also a retired police officer and professor at Northeast Texas Community College. He came and called a couple of his students, and plaster casts were made of the print. Several pics were taken of the cast, and one was even printed in the local newspaper. The cast went on display at the college in the science department. I have the cast. At this time, I'm still trying to find where I had stored to get the dimensions for you. As we were talking with my friend's neighbor, he advised that he oversaw a cabin across from him, bordering my friend's land, way back in the woods. The owner had said that strange things were happening at the place. We saw that the tracks went due east towards this other piece of property. We went to the cabin and saw several more of the footprints going in a circle around the cabin. Over time, we saw and measured 2 other sets of tracks. The only size I remember was 12 inches. The other tracks were bigger than we had a cast. The strange happenings always started in spring and continued until late fall. His property is about 2 miles from the Horton Bottoms, where I know several people who have seen this creature but would not go public for fear of being thought crazy. One was chased out of the bottoms while duck hunting at the slough. I have since moved to a different part of the county. About 8 years ago, a friend and I were walking along the Sulphur River and found tracks going to the water, as if something was getting a drink. As I said, I am still looking for the cast, as my dad put it into storage. As soon as I find it, I would be glad to send you guys a pic. In the cast, you can clearly see the tissue ridges of the bottom of the toes, much like ours. I'm curious if anyone has ever reported anything like this in this area. I have nothing to gain from telling this story. I've been a law enforcement officer in this area for 13 years. At first, I told a couple of people of what I had seen, and most thought I was crazy. Thanks to the internet, I can relay this story. We continue to find tracks on this part of the property. My friend and I hunted on it until we had the encounter. We didn't see anything, but whatever it was kept moving in a circle around us. It was not worried about making noise, as most wild animals do. Today's 11th and final encounter. Delta County, Texas. I was born in 1936 and grew up on a farm in Delta County. While working in the field, we would see what we referred to as the nude woman. It was a large animal walking upright along the edge of the woods and never coming completely out in the open. I left in '54 to serve my country for 23 years, and returning to the same area that I grew up in. Sometime in the mid-'80s, after a heavy rain and flooding, my baby brother found footprints where this animal had departed the water and walked around in the mud. In the early '90s, my mom and dad were traveling down Texas 71 in Delta County, and just before crossing the South Sulphur River, a large man-like animal walked across the road in front of them and stepped across the fence that headed north. Again, in the '90s, my son-in-law and myself had a couple of encounters with a large animal walking through the trees in waist-deep water while we were duck hunting in what is now Cooper Lake. Around '95, while checking my cattle, about 10 p.m., I encountered a rather large man-like animal, looked to be about 8 feet tall, in my light, and he went one way and I went the other. One never hears of this animal any longer, and the only wild animals you see now are wild boar and black panthers.
And there you have it. I hope you all enjoyed this night-ending bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support that keeps the channel growing and going and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is treated with the respect we deserve. Thank you. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant. Keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless.